Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. In this video, I'm going to give my thoughts on the new monster champions that were introduced with Update 24. This is by far the biggest change in the update, and it's a topic that's being discussed heavily right now on the forums. If you want to check out the official discussion thread on this topic, check the description to this video. You'll see a link. As I said, this is a huge change. If you don't know what this is, if you're running quests on hard or elite, and this is epic and heroic, you'll now see certain monsters with a special gold crown above their head. And when you see that, that means they're a monster champion, and that means that they will receive random buffs. Some of the buffs include Death Ward, True Seeing, a damage boost. So basically, as you can tell, the new monster champion system was a effort by the developers to make the game harder because they felt that the game had been getting too easy, and I completely agree with them. The gameplay footage you're watching is actually my first run after Update 24. It's my first experience with Monster Champions, and I do a terrible job in this gameplay of trying to zerg through Sins of Attrition and Amrath. So it's pretty hilarious at some parts. I draw too much aggro in a lot of places. But anyways, back to the topic. Monster Champions are the biggest change in the game, in my opinion, in a lot of years. It's definitely the biggest since Epic Destinies, I would say. And the player base on the forum seems to be very vocal about this. The overall reaction seems to be positive, but there are some players that are very upset, some that are threatening to quit the game over this. It seems like the reaction is extremely divided. Either you're in love with this change or you hate this change. And like I said, personally, I love this change. I think it was needed. I completely agree that the game was getting too easy. Experienced players clearly did not have enough challenge in the game pre-Update 24. There was a lack of meaningful difficulty selection, and that's the main reason that these champions were needed. While casual and normal type players had enough challenge on Elite, Epic Elite, experienced players just didn't. There's a large base of experienced players in this game. I would consider myself one of those, and we just did not have enough challenge. Heroic Elite especially became the more the default difficulty for everybody, whereas it was supposed to represent this whole time during DDO's whole lifespan a difficulty that should require a well-geared, experienced party to get through, and that just hasn't been the case. Also, this change, other than just making the game harder, addressed the problem of dungeons being too predictable, being too static. With this change, there's a percentage of 10% that 10% chance that any random monster will be a champion. So, and there's also a chance that mini bosses can be champions. So, every time you go into a dungeon now, it's going to be different. It's not just going to be the same grind every single time you play a quest. Sometimes the quest will be harder than others, just depending on how lucky you get. Because with a 10% chance, you might get unlucky and see 4 champions out of 10 monsters, or you could get lucky and only see 1 in 20 or 30 mobs. Just depends. That randomness is good. It makes the game more exciting. It makes it less predictable. It makes it more fun. And as I've said, this change gives experienced players more challenge, but at the same time, this game still has plenty of difficulties to support players who either don't want to run on the high difficulties or aren't quite capable. Maybe they're new players, maybe they're less experienced. Normal and hard are now difficulties that are going to be run a lot more often. And normal is supposed to be normal and hard is supposed to be hard, and that really has not been the case throughout I would say the past 2 or 3 years in the game. The game's with definitely the past few updates has continued to get easier. For a long time, the difficulties had been out of balance, and this is the first move to correct that. Elite now actually means elite. Elite, especially Epic Elite, you're now going to probably want a group. You're probably going to need to be well geared, and you're probably going to experience quite a few deaths. And this is one of the good things. This change will encourage a lot more grouping. The game had become too much of a solo game, and party tactics are going to matter a lot more, especially crowd control. Crowd control really comes to mind as being an important part of a party now. If you've not rolled up a crowd control character or a character capable of putting out some good crowd control, this is a great time to do it. Some of these champions can put out a lot of damage, so dancing them or holding them is going to be extremely useful. Also, clerics like myself are going to be more in demand as well, with some of the spike damage that these monster champions can put out. Healers are going to be more wanted in groups. A lot of players aren't going to survive just on their cocoons as much as they could before. This is a multiplayer game, and this change creating more of a need for party tactics is a good thing. It's making the game more interesting, more fun. It's more fun to go into a quest and have to use tactics to get through it rather than just run and zerg stomp through it every single time. And understandably, there's a lot of players, as I've said, who are very mad over this, and I understand. I understand why they are. But I don't agree with them, but I understand their arguments. Basically, a lot of players, a lot of normal players, a lot of casual players are going to be forced to run lower difficulties. They're basically being kicked out of Elite, and that can be hurtful. And XP is going to be harder to get now. Elite streaks especially. Those who have been running elite streaks as the default thing in heroics in the past, which pretty much everyone has, may not do that from now on. Also, those who buy VIP subscriptions mainly for the Elite Open perk may find their VIP subscriptions to have been devalued this update. A lot of players who wanted VIP just to open elites may not want to be VIPs anymore because they either can't handle elites or don't want to run elites with the champions anymore. So I understand if you're a VIP and you're upset. But that doesn't I don't think that justifies the argument that champions are a bad thing. Look, the DDO developers, they let the game be too easy for too long. That's absolutely 100% true. And the last few years especially, they've been undershooting the Elite and Epic Elite difficulties. And players got used to Elite streaking as the norm when Heroic Elite and Epic Hard Epic Elite Streak should have never been so easy to obtain. The developers spoiled us, and it's like giving candy to a baby. All these years we've been sucking on that candy, and all of a sudden the developers took it away from us. If they would have just kept the difficulties consistent through all these years, we wouldn't have this problem. But now that they've let players taste these easy elite streaks, these easy epic elites, players are upset that it's being taken away from them. The developers absolutely should have kept the difficulties more consistent over the past several years, and that's what's causing a lot of animosity in the community. This is a shot to a lot of players' egos. A lot of players consider themselves elite players, and they don't want to go down to hard. But they've just got to get over themselves and realize that there's no shame in running quests on hard. There's no shame in running quests on normal. There's nothing wrong with that. Just have fun with the game. Now on to some of the reasons I don't agree with some of these arguments I put out here, some of these arguments that players have with this change. For those saying that XP is going to be harder to get, yes, it is going to be harder to get on Elite and Hard, but let's not forget the developers just cut everyone a break in Update 20 by rebalancing the XP curve. The overall XP requirements were just, how long has that been? Maybe a year ago, the overall XP requirements were cut vastly. So you're still probably having an easier time than you would with XP before this change, before the XP curve was rebalanced. If you want the best XP in Epics, Epic Normal is probably your best bet now, and it probably was your best bet before the change because of how easy Epic Normal is to the vast majority of players. You can just zerg through those quests and get XP that way rather than put up with Epic Hard or Epic Elite. If you judge it by the minute, a lot of players that I've talked to, a lot of posts that I've read, really advocate running everything on Epic Normal if you're just going for XP grinding because it's just faster, and even though you're getting less XP total on the run, you can do a lot more runs in the same amount of time than you could on hard or elite. So if you want XP, I don't buy the argument that XP is going to be overall more difficult to get through certain epic reincarnations. And there's options for those who don't want to put up with the new monster champions. New and casual players can always make the game easier by running a lower difficulty, but the veterans can't make the game harder by running a difficulty above elite because there is no difficulty above elite, and that's what this change was meant to address. And on that same token, some players might be wondering, why didn't they just make them optional? Well, there's a lot of good reasons for that. First of all, that would have taken a lot of extra developer hours, but the worst thing about that, making them optional, is it would further divide the player base, and we have 4 difficulties already: casual, normal, hard, and elite. We don't need to make extra difficulties with and without champions. And also, doing that would defeat the whole point of champions, which is to make the game harder. This is not a change that the developers want to be optional. It's something that's meant to increase the difficulty overall of the game because the developers have a idea of what they want the difficulty to be, and they don't want it to be optional to play below that difficulty. So even though I like the Monster Champions and I think it's a great idea, and I applaud the developers for doing it, there's some ways we could improve it, and we need to improve it. First of all, we need more buff diversity. The champions seem to only have, while there are some, a decent selection, too many of them have, for example, the damage boost and the true seeing. In fact, there's so many of them have true seeing that displacement clickies about got nerfed to the ground with this new introduction of monster champions. I think we need to see more buff diversity. And on that note, we need a better way to find out what buffs champions have other than just individually selecting them and inspecting them with the examine button. It's not feasible to do this when you're actually in a quest in a fast-paced combat situation. Maybe they could make the crowns a different color depending on the type of buffs the champions have, or maybe they can ditch the crowns altogether and put the buff symbols on top of their heads, something like that. But we need a way to see the champion and know what kind of champion they are. Are they a damage champion that's going to hit us for 400 damage in one shot? Are they a death ward champion that's going to be immune to insta-death, insta-kill spells? The spawn rate also seems to be a bit high. The developers, as I've said, have set the spawn rate at 10%, and the spawn rate is a lot higher than 10% for mini-boss champions. This should probably be capped in encounters where a lot of monsters spawn. Quests like Terminal Delirium, the end fight in that quest, and the end fight of Friends of Low Places come to mind. I ran a Friends of Low Places the other day, and 2 days ago, and there can be like 30 mobs right there in that end fight, and if you get unlucky and there's a huge number of champions, it's probably going to wipe you. So they've got to address that. The champions, I don't think were ever meant to be faced like you weren't ever meant to face like 6 of them at once, 7 of them at once. There shouldn't be whole mobs of champions. There's a problem with the randomness in that if you get really unlucky, you could face a huge horde of champions and get wiped, and that probably shouldn't happen. Some randomness is good, but that much randomness probably needs to be held in check. There should probably be a cap on how many can spawn at once. Also, the champions need to be more visually prominent. Right now, all we get, as you can see in the video, is that little gold crown symbol. And that's hard to see if it's over, say, a small monster like a bat, or if you're in a wave of fighting a big mob of monsters. It's hard to tell which one is the champion. I would like to see a glowing animation on the monster champion's body, maybe make them glow a certain color, maybe make the monster champion's name, maybe put some kind of colored name on top of the monster champion's head, maybe have it say monster champion in some distinctive color. But something needs to be done so that we can more easily spot the monster champions. So other than that, other than those suggestions I have, I'm very happy with this change. The game has needed a jump in difficulty. This is going to make the game more fun overall for everybody. Look, I know some players, it's going to take time for some players to get used to this, and some players are upset that the game's getting harder, but overall, it's making for a more fun game. It's going to be a more complicated game. It's going to be a game that rewards more fun play styles like tactics instead of just Zerg running through everything. And if you don't want to face champions, you don't have to. There's all kinds of lower difficulties, normal and hard, which you can run if you don't want to face the increased difficulty. So overall, this change is giving experienced players the higher difficulties and the higher challenges they want and the party experiences they want, while at the same time allowing soloers to still be supported at lower difficulties and still allow casual and normal players to have a difficulty that suits them available on the normal and hard difficulty. Overall, as I've said, I love this change. Post below and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe and tell your DDO friends and guildies about my channel. Thanks for watching.